Hey, I'm Jeff on the Rive team. I want to talk to you about relative data binding in Rive. So I've got a quick diagram set up here to talk about the difference between the types of binding. What we're used to with Rive is called absolute binding. With absolute binding, when a property is bound on an artboard, it's going to look for its value at a specific location. You can think of this like an index. So in this case, this one's bound to view model 2, which is the second view model in the list, and it's going to look for, in this case, the first property within the second view model, second property within the second view model, or the third property within the second view model. Trying to get the same properties from a different view model, like number 1 in the order, would not work with absolute binding. The difference with relative binding is that instead of looking for an index in a very specific location, relative binding looks for the name of the property. So in this case, we're bound to view model 1, and this text run is going to be bound to my string. So instead of looking for a specific index, it's going to say find the property called my string, and we use that value. So we find my string in the view model, and we're displaying that. Same with my number. So here, this is bound relative to my number, and it's going to find the property called my number. Again, same with color. And then we can see here, if we were to switch this artboard to be bound to view model 2 or any other view model, it's going to not care about the path to the properties. It's just going to look for the name of the properties. So that can be really useful if you might be nesting your components into other artboards or even loading artboards at runtime, and you want to make sure that the properties are going to work regardless of the specific path to the properties. Relative binding can really help to make sure that it finds the name of the property and uses it. So let's look at how relative binding compared to absolute binding works with nested components. I've got two components here that are essentially the same, but one has relative binding set up and one has absolute binding set up. And I've got three view models. There's a main one, which I'll use when I nest these. I've got chart view model 1 and chart view model 2. These two, keeping this simple, each just have a color and a number, and they're both called color and number. So for the relative bound artboard, if I come to my text element and look at the binding for this text run, we'll see it's bound to number from the chart view model, but a bind relative is turned on. And we'll notice if I turn it off, it'll ask me for the path. When I turn on bind relative, it doesn't worry about the path. So that's bound relative, and so is the color property for the chart that's here. And if we preview this, we'll see we're getting the color and number property from the chart view model. The absolute binding version is set up the same way, except that these bindings don't have bind relative ticked on, so they're going to use the absolute binding. This is bound to the number property from chart view model 2. And same with the color, that's going to be bound to the color property from chart view model 2. So it's going to look for it within this specific view model. So I'm going to nest these components here in another artboard. And this artboard has main view model attached to it. Main view model has a number of properties within it, including the color and number, same as the other two view models, but it also has a nested version of the chart view model and an additional trigger and Boolean property, which is going to change the index value for these ones as well. Two components that are here are just placed into the artboard. They don't have their own nested model attached to them. So they're going to take the properties of the view model on the artboard itself. So let's preview the data, and we'll notice that the relative binding version is using the color and number from the main view model. And the absolute binding one is just not working. All right, let's try switching the view model that's attached. Let's attach chart view model preview. Now we'll see that these are the two properties available, and the relative binding version is able to use those. So let's switch it to chart view model 2. Here we'll see that both of the versions are able to use the number and color properties within this view model. That's because with the absolute binding version, these are the exact properties that the original artboard was bound to, and so it's finding those exact properties. The relative binding version is finding them by the property names. It knows it's looking for a color property and a number property. It finds them and it uses them. In another example, we can look at something like character cards where we might have an enemy and a hero. And in this case, I've got an enemy view model with enemy color, image, enemy name, and enemy HP. And the same thing for the hero. This can be published as a library and loaded into another file. Load it here. Open this file from the library. Add my two components. That'll bring in their view models as well. And then I can place those into the slots I have. And this file, while it brought in the library view models, I'm using a different view model called Battle VM here on my artboard where I'm nesting my components. It's got the same property names as each of the library view models, but combined in one view model. And so here we can swap out things like the image and update the values and even the colors. And then these two nested components are going to find the corresponding value within the battle view model because they're relatively bound.